My guest today is Marty Rowland.
My background is an environmental engineer. I've been in the industry for about 49 years, recently retired from the New York City Parks Department. Probably my biggest job was in the NASA facility in New Orleans, where I cleaned up hundreds of tons of trichloroethylene out of the groundwater. But recently I've been educating and just advocating the solution to ending poverty, which is the Henry George philosophy.
All right. Do you want to jump right into this controversy, the May Crok controversy? Yeah. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I thought what we do. I mean, that's the reason I'm on this podcast is that you had a show with Andy May, and I figured, well, why don't we talk to the horse's mouth, I suppose. So the controversy was that I was let go from the American Journal of Economic Sociology. And so I don't really have any hard feelings for the AJES or Wiley, the publisher, but it was really a matter of a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding was that I was and continue to be climate indifferent. And I think I need to define that because people have different reasons for saying that. The indifference was that I wanted to hear all sides of the debate and successfully got May and Crok to submit a paper. That's really just a list of all the things that they believe in. And that's what and they're known climate skeptics, let's say. So I reached out. I got maybe around 10 papers on both sides. Got one from a guy named Tinus. Can't remember his last name. Anyway, so we had people who opposed each other and some that had some good data. So the misunderstanding was that the paper went out when it was approved, and there was an assumption that AJES is on the skeptic bandwagon, let's say, and it wasn't the case. What wasn't published online was my reason for doing this special edition, which was to hear all sides. So that wasn't sufficient. So I was asked to leave, so I did.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you have no hard feelings over this, because I would, and your views, I think. Yeah.
Well, part of the reason is that I'm not really relying on that income. I'm retired. I got 2 pensions. I got Social Security. So the reason why I'm not any hard feelings is that the mission of the American Journal of Economic Sociology was all about promoting the Georgist message and method. So I wish them well on continuing that mission. And perhaps I can publish something later, but I think they just kind of caved into the to that climate narrative, which I plan to talk on a little bit. I did list down like 6 things that I wanted to cover today, and maybe we'll cover them. The first one is this idea of doubt, faith, and the average global temperature. I think that's taken on the image of God, and that might be something we could talk about. Then the climate narrative, then climate skepticism, of course, and then what I mean by climate indifference. Why I was hired in the first place at the AJES, and maybe cover some of the things that I'm doing today, including writing a book on what I call it the Rowland Triangle, which kind of provocative, but so anyway, those are the things I want to talk about. I don't know if you wanted to go right down the list. It's up to you.
Let's do that. Let's go right down the list. It sounds great.
Richard Feynman, 1965, Nobel physicist, and he was the one that said that science is about doubt and religion is about faith. And I thought this kind of capsulized the message that I wanted to bring out, and it gets into what the climate narrative seems like. That what he said has been flipped. that there's this idea that we need to have faith that the science is there, and if we're not on board, we're bad people. And I think that's the mistake. So that's characterized pretty much in the media, and I think so. Then the skeptics are the ones like May and Crok, who had that paper in the journal that I wanted. They have spent the time reviewing all the reports and can say authoritatively why they're a skeptic. And I haven't done the research, so I don't think that I qualify to be a skeptic or somebody with the narrative. I'm more of the indifferent. And I think indifference has to do with not willing to be bullied by either side, that I'm a bad person if I don't swallow the whole thing or drink the Kool-Aid, I guess is the way they describe it. I think, interestingly, Bill Gates defined a position that I think is good, which is he doesn't believe that we need to worry about the climate temperature, the average global temperature. But what we should do is find those methods and those technologies to develop products that are just as good as the polluting ones. So it's like it's kind of like an indifferent point of view. I think it's very valuable. I think it's valuable in the sense that it allows people like me to say I'm climate indifferent, and that's okay. I'm not a bad person. But one thing, in my professional life, I'm not indifferent about the cause of poverty in the world. And as Henry George would say, that it's all about not collecting as revenue the value of land that could be. So I'm very passionate about that, and I'm not sure how many climate advocates are as compassionate about my thing. Yeah. So
do you want to talk at all about any of the details about who exactly was pushing, to get rid of the May Crok stuff? And maybe you don't want to share that.
It's mostly what I heard. And what I heard was that it wasn't the American Journal of Economic Sociology. It was Wiley, who had been contacted by, I heard that it was Michael Mann. And Michael Mann is one of the leading advocates for the climate narrative. He was also involved in that 2009 Climate Gate, which you might be familiar with. And some people get that kind of confused because it wasn't such a thing that in the Climate Gate that evidence of data manipulation was a bad thing. What was most troubling to me was that there seemed to be collusion that among the climate advocates, that journal editors needed to be canned or taken out of their positions. Now, why would that be such an important thing if there wasn't some nefarious reason, such as pushing a narrative that may not be true, that might have some ulterior motive? So that's what I understand to be the case. And once it gets going, it's almost like a matter of a business decision. So that's why I'm not too much of hard feelings, because the journal has a business to run. Wiley has a business to run. Wiley has been charged with other types of lapses of judgment. So I think it was kind of like a knee-jerk reaction that we just don't need this thing. Everything was rolling around fine before this Dr. Rowland got involved. So that's my understanding. So I was asked to do that job by a fellow Georgist, Cliff Cobb, and I was really excited about being asked, because Cliff is a very smart person, very much of an advocate for Henry George. And it was unfortunate that I could only do 2 issues But it's okay. I've got plenty of things to do.
I'm curious, how did Michael Mann get this much power? It seems like it's not just you, but he's got the power to get people fired, or is he threatening legal action, or what's going on?
Well, I know that I read the material, and so the way I understand it, that he was sued. Mike, I can't remember, a guy named Stein. I can't remember his name. But anyway, there was a lawsuit, and apparently the jury kind of sided with Michael Mann for whatever reason. So his, Michael's legal team is pretty well funded. I'm not sure that he's spent a lot of money, but definitely Stein almost went bankrupt for this, and he's in poor health, I understand. So it seems as though that there was a well-funded movement to promote this narrative for whatever reason. Before Bill Gates flipped, he was advocating not eating meat and eating bugs and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I really welcomed when he changed his attitude. So I don't really know what's behind it. I think I've seen in other countries this idea of a cryptocurrency based on social observations, like a carbon credit thing, where you can't open a door maybe because you use too much carbon, so you're kind of like that old McGowan, The Prisoner TV show. I think that's the vision that I fear.
I'm curious if this, it's not symmetrical at all, right? That if you publish something that was pro-alarmist, did like Exxon or anybody else try to get you fired and say you can't be publishing that? It's not like that, is it?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. All I know is what I did at the American Journal of Economic Sociology, and I just reached out. I had a minister that got one of the papers published, and he was anti Donald Trump, but he was talking about his experiences about being anti climate, I guess, and then he changed, and he's on board, and he said he had an epiphany, and so he's really on the the side of the climate narrative. So that was a great story that he shared. So I think it's good. In the George's point of view, it's great to listen to all sides. Don't and really, if you think about it, it gets to the money that's being invested in one thing or the other. There's a lot of things that in the world we need. We need less war. We need more health care. We need all these things. So when we spend our money on things that may not be true, that's really something we have to think hard about. And I think that's the scientist in me. Is this the best way to go?
So other than from Michael Mann, did you receive a lot of other pushback from other people or even your friends or anything about, oh, no, you can't be publishing this stuff that's against the narrative?
No, not really. I just shared yesterday. I ran into a friend from where I just retired and told him what I was doing, and he's totally okay. I think people are. I think in general, my friends are they're open to debate, to understanding people's motives. And,
all right. Sorry to derail your 6 points, but maybe you want to go on with this.
So the whole idea, I think I mentioned, I think the whole idea about the average global temperature being the new God is that, for a long time, there was never such thing as a average global temperature. It seems, because you can't directly measure what an average is. So what is well known and documented is the regional variations that we've experienced in the last 2,300 years, where there's this warm period, cold period, warm period, cold period. And for 175 years, we've been on this on the current climate cycle. So If everything is consistent for 2,300 years, we are maybe about a 1 or 1.5 degrees C above this average from all these years, which means that, that 1.5 is the natural variation. So this is the point that the climate narrative is trying to suppress, is that, oh, no, that 1.5 is not natural. It's caused by man-made gas, and well, it's kind of hard to say that that's true. But if there's a natural element to this warming, and there's say 2 or 3 degrees C to go in this climate cycle, which would be what we've experienced, then we're kind of like off the mark, saying that it's all about the CO2 from from the man-made gases. So that was the point I wanted to make about the doubt and the faith. It just seems like that's switched. And I mentioned a little bit about climate skepticism, climate indifference. You talked about that. One of the things that I think is important is to talk about the Journal of Economic Sociology. It came out. Its first issue was like 2 months before the outbreak of World War II. So it's been around a long time. And John Dewey, the philosopher, wrote an opening for that journal and said that this journal needs to honor the legacy of Henry George, who was able to combine thoughts about human relations and economics, politics, culture, and morality. And you often don't hear those things in combination, but that's really the way that we should be looking at economics. It's not a way of this group trying to outdo another group, but it's like, let's come up with a system that people prefer over something else. And if we're not doing a good job, let's go to Congress and hammer out something that's better. So I think that's why I really like that journal, and hope they stick to their original purposes. I could talk a little bit about the book that I'm writing.
Do that.
So recently I've been thinking about how do I best promote something, now that I'm retired and not working, got plenty of time. So I thought, Henry George's message is important, but I think it actually increases in importance when we combine it with two other things. So this is what I call the Rowland Triangle, and it's about preparedness, it's about cooperation, and anti-monopoly. And anti-monopoly is what Henry George is all about, the monopoly and private property, and treating land as capital. That's the problem, that land is really meant to be available to everybody on Earth. And if they don't have access to the land itself, that society has an obligation to extract a rent from the landowners to share with the community that created the value in the first place. So if we start with the preparedness, I got an image there of Paul Revere, and if you saw Ken Burns' recent documentary, I guess that's how I got inspired to put him at that corner. But the whole idea is that Paul Revere had this nemesis, which was the King George III of England. And so Paul ran out into to the others in the community and told them about the invasion. So it's all about preparedness. He was ready to do that. And that's the kind of attitude that I think people in our society need to do, whether being prepared to out things that aren't true, to be on your toes, to be inquisitive. I think that's part of the triangle, and this is all about public policy. Now, the second one, you may not be aware of Eleanor Ostrom, but Eleanor wrote a paper called Governing the Commons, and she essentially overturned what was the common belief that there's a tragedy of the commons. So her nemesis was this guy named Garrett Hardin, who said that people can't cooperate, that the best we can do is privatize things. So she had this nemesis. And then, Eleanor, she identified 8 principles of sharing resources. She called them common pool resource management system. So, and that's really what my PhD was about. I showed that those principles that Eleanor uncovered were in play in Tampa in their water management system, and I could talk more about that if somebody wanted to hear about it. And before I go to the third one, I do have a list of things that I'm ready to talk about on the Common Ground USA Speakers Bureau. So if you just put that in the Google search, you'll find out more about me. So if we go to the third triangle, edge of the triangle is Henry George, and his nemesis was Pope Leo the 13th. Today we get the 14th, but back in the 1890s, he went to battle for a friend of his who's a Catholic priest that was one of his colleagues in his move to end poverty. And so he wrote this long rebuttal to the Pope, who excommunicated his friend. The Pope eventually ended that excommunication, but he essentially, in his long letter, described why the priest shouldn't be excommunicated, because the nature of land and when people use their labor to create wealth, certainly they own that, but people can't own the land, which is a gift of God. And I think that's the message of Henry George and the morality. So the idea I have in this is that there's 3 corners. Each of the corners, they have this position, and they each have a nemesis that we need to keep in mind. And when we go into policy activity, we need to keep in mind those 3 corners. And I think we'd be a lot more prepared for adversity, I'd say. So that's what motivates me today.
Yeah, I did just pull up your Common Ground page, and there's a lot of stuff listed there, a lot of papers completed in recent years. I don't know if you want to mention any of those. Like one that jumps, one says bridge rent could have saved the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
Yeah, so this is something that some people don't understand, is that in 1977, the Francis Scott Key Bridge was completed. And so from 77 to the time that it got hit by the ship Dolly, ships had increased in size by 3 times, and the cargo is so much more. So there was actually what I call a risk rent, or maybe a bridge rent, that wasn't collected, that these shipping companies just took advantage of the people of Baltimore, and by not putting in the guardrails sufficient, or the practices of these shipping companies. There was reports that the engine didn't work, that emergency systems didn't work. So it was kind of like, what me worry, I guess. Now, the thing that happened afterwards is that they were fined $100 million, which is 5% of the $2 billion that's going to be needed to rebuild this thing. So, why would anybody do the proper things to begin with if they're only going to be asked to do 5%? It's really one of these these things in economics that few people understand, the importance of infrastructure and how we need to be prepared using that corner of the triangle, I suppose. So that was one paper. I guess the other one that I'm hoping gets some attention is guardrailing the AI. So this is prominent in discussions today. So essentially my proposal is that whenever AI is let loose to do whatever it does, there should be a requirement that 3 protocols be evaluated as part of the analysis. And one of them is the Isaac Asimov 3 rules for robots, which is pretty well understood that they shouldn't kill people and they shouldn't do anything to harm themselves. The second one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which are pretty straightforward. These are the things that people need, and if they get higher up the hierarchy, they can be self-fulfilling and have self-esteem and such, which is, what Henry George would promote is peace and fairness. And then the third one, it was concerned a course that I just finished teaching, and it was about a book, trying to remember his first name, but Brett Christophers. He outlined the history of the UK and how almost everything in the UK is privatized to the point that there's so much inefficiency and so much economic rent that's being extracted by the people that are subverting the whole system. So if those 3 protocols were looked at by any AI analysis, you'd be able to put out policy briefs that would say, well, you can do X, Y, and Z, but have you thought about not doing this because it's going to impact, say, this country in Africa or this group in America? So it's kind of like, yeah, you can do anything you want and in the world if you want, but once you consider being human, so it's kind of interesting that AI would come back and say, you should think about your humanness when you take advice from me, the robot. So that was an interesting paper that I wrote. I guess the other thing that's what I'm active in is there's the various Georgist organizations, and one of them is Common Ground USA. The other one is the International Union for the Taxation of Land Value. And this is a United Nations NGO, which is kind of a fun thing. And I'm trying to, right now we're in the process of sending letters to the socialist mayors of New York and Seattle and getting them to use a common standard practice on managing infrastructure. So the socialist mayors say we need free health care, we need to have free buses, and all those things can be done at lower costs. One of them is the capturing of land value, but whether you do it that way or some other way, there are protocols that you use where the mayor might be the leader of a discussion group, and we solicit citizens to say, well, how are we going to measure these things? And, just have very open and robust discussions. So we're saying, okay, pro bono, we'd be more than happy to help you achieve your ideals, because there's so much doubt that they're so way out. And I don't really think that these mayors are very much out of the mainstream of what most people want.
One other item that jumps out on your Common Ground page is obstacles toward a net zero grid. Is that a paper or a course that you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've got a really good friend of mine. His name's Sean Hagan. He's a professional engineer. He designs nuclear power plants, and we've had various discussions about net zero. And essentially, well, he's making the case, and I kind of help him couch it into social justice language. But solar and wind and other renewables are great energy sources when you look at the smaller grid, let's say in the size of neighborhoods or maybe several blocks. But once you go putting renewables on the grid, you have to have stable either nuclear or oil or natural gas. You have to have them as backup. So anytime you have renewables, it's not free or clean energy. You always have to have a polluting energy source, unless it's like nuclear in terms of air quality. So the argument in the paper was that once you realize that you have to have energy that's available all the time, that you no longer have an argument for the natural gas, and because natural gas has always got to be there. So we're really kind of advocating use the renewables where it makes sense, and that's with individual buildings, let's say in Queens, New York, where I'm at, or neighborhoods, and you start so you don't lose anything throwing it onto the grid. And I guess that's the problem, is thinking that we got to make the grid green, and what we need is a grid that's reliable and cost effective. And I think everybody's looking at nuclear as a possibility, and I really think that climate advocates need to be a little bit more open to things such as nuclear, and some of them are.
Okay, again, I think I'm derailing your 6 points here, but
Oh, no, I think I covered them. It was the doubt in the faith, the climate narrative, the skepticism, the climate indifference, my firing at the journal, and what I'm doing today. Let's see if there's yeah, that was the item that I wanted to make sure, and it seems like you helped me along reading the common ground you had said.
did you mention the name of your new book?
Well, no, I think it's just called the Rowland Triangle, and I kind of played on the idea of the Bermuda, because that, within the Bermuda Triangle, you don't want to be in it, but in the Rowland Triangle, you do want to be in it. You want to consider all those points of view when you're advocating public policy. So, well, we'll have to see. I've got plenty of time to write it, and I can get off the couch every so often and add a few more words.
Do you have thoughts at all on the big picture in America, about the national debt, about what we're going to do about that?
Well, yeah. So I don't apologize for always coming back to Henry George, but I did teach a course on his last book before he passed away, and he covered the idea of the role of money, and in fact, a lot of his ideas were being discussed during the 30s, when the banking reforms were being passed, like the Glass-Steagall, and in 1913 there was the Federal Reserve. But essentially, one of the thing that is debated within my circles is the idea that there's a misguidedness in the idea of the United States selling treasuries. So if you think about it, the United States sells treasuries, and the idea is that, well, we need the money to fund the deficit, but the U.S. Treasury, they create currency, and people call it fiat currency. But when currency is created, like FDR did during the 30s, it was to get the economy rolling. Woody Guthrie was given money to write songs for example. Other people built dams, but people were allowed to do what they do to create wealth, whether it's creating songs or generating electricity. So those are the kind of things we need to think about today. And one of the things that I think what we need to do is stop selling treasuries, because there's no reason to be paying interest on currency that the government, sovereign government can do. So, and then going back to the book that Henry George wrote, he advocated for this idea of greenbacks, which was something that Lincoln issued during the Civil War, so that the Union could win the fight in that war, was just to create a system so that if successful, we can have a country that survives and prospers afterwards. So it's kind of like priming the pump. You know where you're going, and you know what good investments are and what you need to do. And I think we need to get back to that viewpoint. I read X all the time, and somebody posted something like, I think it was Modern China, saying that if communism is so bad, why has China got high-speed rail going all over the place? We can have that kind of thing too. It's just a matter of not spending money on the wrong things. I think that's my big picture.
So are you mostly just a consumer of stuff on X, or do you post? I didn't find your account there.
Yeah, I post. A lot of times I like to be cynical or to point out things to make people think. Yeah, so that's what I do. I think it's good. And, when people say there's got to be truth on social media, well, what about people who just like to be, poignant, that just like to see things that don't make sense and be critical of them? I think it, like when somebody says something provocative, we should think about it, and whether it's if it provokes thought, I think that's a positive thing. Now, whether it's true or not, I think it's beside the point. So that's the way that I use social media, is to comment, and I'm always advocating for Henry George on there. I advocate some of the things that we talked about today.
You may have mentioned the name of the book, but it says here on Crok that his seminal book was Progress and Poverty. Is that the one book you'd have people read to learn about his stuff? Or?
Yeah, so if you really have time and interest, reading Progress and Poverty, written in 1879, is the way to go. Most people don't have the time, but it was a very valuable experience. I don't know how many days it took me to read that, but he does a great job of going into detail of how to understand the economy. And I think he was one of the last classical economists who said that the factors of production include land, labor, and capital. And what happened in the neoclassical era of the 20th century was that they merged land as capital, and that was what did in Henry George, because that opens up the idea of being being unjust. The idea that land is capital, that you can take land from people, or you can monopolize land and not allow people to have access to air, water, land. So that's the problem with the way economics is viewed today. So, yeah, it's a great book. Now there has been smaller versions of that are useful, but I guess the other thing I'd advise people that are watching today is go to the Henry George website, the Henry George Social Science, Henry George school of social science and look at what's on the agenda. I teach there often. We've got other courses that are being offered. We interview thinkers. Yanis Varoufakis has been interviewed a couple of times over the years. I'm always looking to get new speakers. So yeah, I keep active.
So is that an in-person school in Chicago? Is that right?
Well, no, there is a school in Chicago, but I'm in New York City, and we're located on 3rd Avenue near 38th, East 38th, and since COVID, we've been doing most of our teaching online, but I think we're gonna host special events. If we can get authors to show up, we could have events such as that.
I have another specific question here. I don't know if you have any opinion on, let's say you're a working man of the age 25 in America right now, and what would you do to try to preserve your capital or try to eventually work your way up the economic ladder? Do you have trust in the dollar, or would you put the money in the stock market or gold, or what would you do?
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I get you're letting on that's your viewer base. That's good. But I remember when I was 25, so we're talking about 77. Yeah, I was recently out of college. What I pursued, what I did when I was 25, I was always interested in the environment, and I kind of lucked out that was the cycle when all the environmental laws were being passed. Hazardous waste, solid waste, toxic waste, OSHA, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. So I kind of fell into a zeitgeist that was long in coming, and it carried me for 49 years. Now, is there another thing? I would think that perhaps keeping your eye on social justice and finding a way of earning a living by being true to yourself and true to society might be the way to go. Because I think there's always going to be positions open for people that are sincere and looking for value. There's 2 guys that are doing an excellent job advocating, the Henry George ideas, and they could be looked at as a model for what people may want to do, is join groups that are looking to implement the ideas of Henry George, the capturing land value. One of the things that they're active in is in Baltimore, for example. There's so much poverty in Baltimore, and it looks like there's a move to open up for capturing land value. So I keep talking about that, but I think the thing that's important is that when you look at who's earning most of who's capturing, let's say, who's capturing most of the value in land value, it's speculators, people who have parking lots, empty office buildings. Nobody owes them anything, and here we are giving them tax breaks by not charging what's really due. And so when you go about capturing land value, you're able to collect what's not be collected and give it to people who are working hard and shouldn't be paying income tax on that. So I guess what I would suggest to a 25-year-old is look into what Lars Doucet, LarsDoucet, Greg Miller is another one. Look at what they're doing. Maybe 1 or 2 out of your community will give them a call or read their stuff join that movement. I'm really kind of excited. I'm not sure how old they are, but I don't think they're much older than 25. So they might be heroes.
So I'm looking again at your bio, and you really have had a focus on cleaning up the environment for many decades. Is that still a focus? And what do you think is the biggest environmental problem in America right now?
Okay, yeah. So I started my environmental career in Michigan, and I was the first regulator in the Southeast Michigan, Detroit area, regulating solid waste landfills. Then I moved to New Orleans, where I cleaned up hundreds of tons of trichloethylene that had spilled into the groundwater from the Apollo program, from the space shuttle program. That was really kind of fun because I was right on the cutting edge of some of the technologies. And then I moved to New York, where instead of one 834-acre site for NASA in New Orleans, now I had the whole city of New York with its 5 boroughs and 300 years of chemical contamination. Yeah, that was always a challenge. And some of the challenge was convincing people that there's toxics in the surface soils in New York City. I don't know why that was so difficult. I mean, automobiles until like the 70s, they spewed lead from the exhaust pipes. And one of the things I learned in New Orleans, somebody did a study of how much lead is in the soil at a stoplight. So, cars are stopping there and they're spewing out their stuff. So there's highest levels of lead at stop signs, intersections. So I think probably the biggest problem in nowadays, if the United States was a lot smaller, like maybe Japan, I would say the biggest problem is where to put your solid waste. It seems like in the United States, Pennsylvania and Ohio are so wide. Virginia just seems like New York City never runs out of states that they can send their garbage to in train cars. So that's how. Well, New York, we do. We just passed a law for composting. So if you look at people who advance the climate narrative, for example, I bet a lot of them don't compost their organics, but anybody who lives in New York City, we're required to. So I score high on the climate narrative thing. Just being in New York City, I take the subway, I walked here and there and keep my car parked most of the time. So I think the biggest problem in the United States might be just the lack of consumer protection on buying things. Like every so often you hear about products coming from China that have lead in it or chokes people. I think by and large, I think industry is pretty careful on chemical waste. I think if you get near a industrial area, I think there might be a tendency to let some of the emissions kind of go off when people aren't looking. Another thing, going back to that point on that triangle, preparedness. I see examples of factories blowing up just recently in the news. So I think there's this trying to skimp on being prepared. Like there's ways of doing things. And I think in the effort to reduce labor costs or repairs and stuff, I think we take too many chances. Kind of like the Francis Scott Key Bridge. We just let the shipping industry do whatever the hell it wanted to, and and we paid a price. So I think, if anything, in the United States, one of the dangers we have is just being lax. It's kind of like that. Was that Northern and Southern Railroad that East Palestine, I think. Where is that? Ohio.
Yeah.
And all that toxic gases, and it's all because of failure of a braking system. So, it seems like you could sit like 100 high school students in a room and look at most of these disasters and just say, well, what should we do different? And I think within, feed them pizza at lunch, and I think by 8 hours, you'd probably have solutions to most of the problems in the United States. Somehow we're so lax.
I don't think I fully understand. For sure, I don't. What happened with the Francis Scott Key Bridge, or what's the number one thing that should have been done that wasn't done?
Well, I think what happened was that the guardrails at the Francis Scott Key Bridge might have been adequate for the size of ships in 1977, but by 2024, he had 3 times the size, and so they never upgraded their protective system. One of the things that I did my analysis and gave a presentation to the civil engineers was that if you look at how much commerce went on, imports and exports in Baltimore, and you charged a 28 cents per ton on what was coming in and out, you could have raised like $90 million that could have gone to have the protective system that would have saved the bridge. They did something, they spent about that much on a bridge that was nearby, but for some reason they chose not to protect the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And, in the presentation I made to the engineers, I made a point. I said, as engineers, you need to not wimp out when it comes to public safety. If you know that there's a problem, stand up and say, this is not good, or yell out bullshit or something. So I don't know if they took my message to heart, but that's what I told them. But that was kind of disappointing. So I guess who has power in the world when you can get away with things that are outrageous. In the shipping industry, and the Dali ship is a prime example of that.
So I'm, again, way behind your terminology. When you say guardrails, is that any sort of a physical thing? You're talking about
We're talking
rules?
about AI. Guardrailing is just, that there might be a problem. We all, I just recently watched Terminator on TV, and so you think about what AI could be, and you say, well, we're humans, and we're creating these things. Why would we not protect humans as a prime objective? Like, like if like somebody who's against our interest bribes us to look the other way for some reason, shouldn't you be suspicious that somebody that's not got your interest wants to give you money to do something that's doesn't seem to make sense? So, that's what the term guardrailing is, just, another example of the preparedness. And that's what you do when you try to set the parameters so that you're off on a good direction.
So in the case of that accident on that bridge, that was just incompetence, et cetera. It wasn't that anybody wanted this to happen, not sabotage. Yeah.
Well, I think it was just, tragedy of events, because I think the emergency system was out of whack. I think the engines were failing, like there might have been a short of some sort. So they knew that there were some problems when they're in the harbor. So that was the time when I guess if the Coast Guard had some authority, they would have stopped it. They would have grounded it. There needed to be a better system. So that was the other thing that I found when I was doing the research, was that on air travel, you got the NTSB. Every time there's an accident, the group does investigation. But when it comes to shipping, there's no such investigative board. That's the way I understood it, but it seems pretty clear that that's the case, because you got everything that they learned about the ship, and I haven't heard of any report saying that from here on out these ships are going to be in top-notch shape, and they're going to pay more than $100 million if they take down a $2 billion bridge.
All right, we're coming up to the end of our hour here. Anything else you want to cover? Any other points to make before we finish?
No, I think I'd just like to say thanks for having me on. I thank Andy May for introducing you to me. I think that people should maybe re-listen to this podcast if there's something that they didn't understand what I said. I think if they have time, take a look at the Henry George School of Social Science and look at upcoming activities and courses that I might teach. And I guess, have faith that there are people out there trying to improve society. And I think we've got some pretty good ideas that we just need to have people open to ideas. I'm really kind of hoping that we can get these letters off to the Seattle and New York City mayors, because I think they have an opportunity to be groundbreaking.
All right, Marty Rowland, thanks a lot for doing this. You're a very interesting guy, digging into a lot of stuff. And I will put related links right in the show description for the Common Ground and for the Henry George School. So,
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot, Tom.
all right, talk to you later.